The snow had been falling since 4 inches the afternoon, and by 7 it had buried the city under 6 inches of silence. Inside Aurelius, the kind of restaurant where the lighting was dim enough to keep secrets and the menu had no prices, Emily Carter sat alone at table 9. She had requested that table specifically. It faced the window. She liked watching things from a distance. Her coat was draped over the back of the chair, cashmere, charcoal gray, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her wineglass was half full. She had not looked at her phone in 40 minutes, which was unusual. Her assistant had flagged it. Her assistant flagged everything. She was 36 years old and ran a private equity firm that managed $11 billion in assets. She had been on the cover of Forbes twice and Fortune once. She did not especially enjoy any of those things, but she had done them because they were what came next, and Emily Carter had always done what came next. The restaurant hummed softly around her, white tablecloths, low jazz from somewhere behind the bar, the clink of crystal, the murmur of conversations she had no interest in. A new server arrived at her table. He was tall, over 6 feet, with the kind of lean build that came not from vanity, but from years of not eating enough. Deep brown skin, close-cropped black curls. Mid, 40s, she guessed, though there was something in his face that was harder to date, as if time had worked on it differently than on other people. His jaw was set in a way that suggested he had made a habit of keeping things to himself. He set down the breadbasket without looking at her. "Will you be ordering from the tasting menu this evening, or would you prefer to choose individually?" His voice was quiet, not timid, just careful with itself, like a man who had learned that words cost something. "Individually," Emily said. He nodded and produced the menu, the full one, with prices, and set it at the edge of the table without ceremony. Most servers made a small performance of it. He didn't. She watched him move away toward the adjacent table, unhurried, no wasted motion. There was a precision to the way he worked that felt out of place. Not the precision of someone trained in hospitality, but of someone trained in something else entirely. She picked up the menu and did not read it. She was watching his hands. He was pouring water at the next table when she saw it. A pale line, thin and curved, running from the base of his left thumb across the inside of his wrist and disappearing beneath his cuff. Old scar tissue silvered with age, the kind of scar that came from something more serious than a kitchen accident. Emily Carter set the menu down. Her heart did something strange. Not racing, not lurching, just a single heartbeat as if it had been startled awake. She had seen that scar before. She had been 16 years old, trapped inside a crumpling car on a mountain highway. And that scar, or the wound that would become it, had been on the hand reaching through the broken window to pull her free. She looked at him again, the set of his shoulders, the way he kept his left hand slightly angled. Not consciously perhaps, but habitually, as if long ago he had gotten used to keeping that side of himself turned away from people. "It's not him," she told herself. "It was 20 years ago. You were a child. You barely saw his face." She picked up her wineglass. Her hand was perfectly steady. She was very good at that. Emily had built her career on pattern recognition, spotting what didn't fit, what had been smoothed over, what someone was trying not to say. She had a gift for it that her earliest mentor had called uncomfortable, and that she had quietly decided was her most valuable asset. She used it now. Over the next 40 minutes, while she ordered the halibut and ate it slowly and declined dessert, she watched Marcus Ellison. She'd read the name on his service tag when he leaned across the adjacent table with the same focused, unhurried attention she would have given a company she was considering acquiring. He was older than her initial estimate, probably 44 or 45. His hands were careful. He used his right hand for almost everything, pouring, placing, gesturing in a way that wasn't natural but practiced. The kind of compensatory habit that a person stopped noticing they had developed until someone pointed it out. He never smiled unnecessarily. When other tables laughed at something, he gave a small nod and moved on. He wasn't cold. He was contained. There was a table of 4 celebrating something near the back of the room, and when they became louder than the restaurant's atmosphere really allowed, Emily watched him move toward them, not to shush them, but to appear naturally with a fresh round of drinks, diffusing the energy simply by being present and calm. It worked. He knows how to manage a situation, she thought. He's done that before. Not here. She paid the bill in cash. She always carried cash and left a tip that was exactly double what anyone else in the restaurant would have left. She folded it under the breadbasket rather than leaving it visible on the table. On the way out, she paused at the coat check. "The server who handled table 9, she said to the young woman at the counter. "What's his schedule?" The woman looked uncertain. "I'm not asking for personal information," Emily said, not coldly, but with the precision of someone who understood the difference. "I'd like to request him specifically when I return. He was very attentive. He's here Tuesday through Saturday, dinner service." Emily nodded and walked out into the snow. The city was quiet the way it only got when the snow was heavy enough to muffle sound. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment and tilted her head back and let a few flakes fall against her face. 20 years ago, she had been coming back from a ski weekend with her family, her father driving, her mother asleep in the passenger seat, Emily in the back with a novel she wasn't really reading. It was late January. The roads had iced over faster than the forecast suggested. Her father had lost control of the car on a curve, and they had gone through the guardrail. She remembered the cold, the smell of gasoline, her father unconscious against the airbag, her mother crying, the way the car was tilted at a wrong angle, and she couldn't get the door open. And then a man had appeared at the broken rear window. He had spoken to her in a low, steady voice. "I've got you. Just hold on. I've got you." And had cut through her seatbelt and pulled her free into the snow and then gone back for her mother and then her father. She had sat in the snow watching him work. And she had not been afraid. Not because the situation wasn't terrifying, but because he moved as if he already knew exactly how it would end. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was gone. She had given a statement. The police had taken it. The report had listed the rescuer as unknown male, approximate age 25-30, dark hair. There had been blood on the snow where he had been standing. Her father's attorney had tried to locate him to offer compensation. Nothing had come of it. She had thought about him intermittently for 20 years. She hailed a cab and got in and sat back against the seat and watched the city move past the fogged window. It could be a coincidence, she thought. Men have scars. She did not believe in coincidences. The apartment was on Kenmore Avenue, third floor of a building that was clean but tired, the kind of place where the radiator knocked at night and the super fixed things eventually. The hallway smelled of someone's cooking, something with garlic and onion, and there was a child's drawing taped to the door of Unit 3C, a yellow house, 2 figures, one taller than the other, a bright little picture of a black family in crayon. Marcus Ellison unlocked the door at 11:47 p.m. and stood in the entry for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dark. He took off his coat and hung it on the hook by the door, untied his shoes, and set them neatly on the mat. The small rituals of a man who lived alone with a child and had learned that order was the cheapest form of control. The apartment was narrow, but he had done things with it. Bookshelves on every wall, real books, not decorative ones. A second-hand couch with a blanket folded over one arm. On the kitchen counter, a coffee maker and a small cactus that had survived 3 years without much effort on anyone's part. On the table, a sheet of construction paper with the words, "Welcome home," Dad written in blue crayon, slightly crooked. He touched the edge of it with 2 fingers, then went to check on Nia. She was asleep with her tight curls fanned out across the pillow, and one arm hanging off the edge of the bed, as she always was. He lifted the arm and tucked it back under the blanket. She stirred but didn't wake. 8 years old. Every morning she woke up ready to argue about something, and every night she fell asleep mid-sentence if you let her. She was the most specific person he had ever known. He went to the kitchen and filled a glass of water and drank it standing at the sink, looking out the window at the snow still coming down, thinner now, but steady. His shift had run late. The restaurant was short-staffed in the winter. The manager, Greg, had asked twice this week if Marcus could take additional shifts, and Marcus had said yes both times. Because extra shifts meant extra money, and extra money meant Nia could stay in her after-school program through February. He set the glass down and rubbed the base of his left thumb with his right hand, an old habit, mostly unconscious, like touching a place where something had healed wrong. He had noticed the woman at table 9. He noticed everyone at his tables. It was the job. But he had noticed her the way you noticed a particular quality of light. Not because it was intrusive, but because it was different. She watched things carefully, watched him carefully. And when their eyes had met briefly while he was refilling the water glass, there had been something in her expression that was not curiosity exactly, more like recognition. He had seen that look before twice. Both times he had handled it the same way he handled everything he didn't want to deal with. He went quiet and kept moving and waited for it to pass. He was good at waiting for things to pass. He went to bed at 12:15 and lay in the dark for a while, listening to the building settle around him, and thought about nothing in particular, and eventually slept. Emily's assistant, Margot, was 28 years old and had a graduate degree in information science and the rare ability to find things that weren't meant to be found without making a moral issue of it. By Wednesday morning, she had emailed Emily a file. Emily read it at her desk, door closed, while her coffee went cold. Marcus Jamal Ellison, date of birth the 3rd of March 1981, enlisted U.S. Army, age 19, served 2 tours, honorable discharge 2007, joined Franklin County Search and Rescue 2007, 2011, commendations. 3. Resigned January 2011 due to injury sustained on duty. Previous marriage to Tiana Ellison, née Brooks, 2010, 2014, dissolved. 1 child, Nia Ellison, born 2016. Current employment, Aurelius Restaurant Server, 2022, present. Prior employment, various, including warehouse supervisor, delivery driver, building superintendent. Emily read the file twice. Then she pulled up the older documents Margot had included. A newspaper clipping from the Franklin County Gazette, the 29th of January, 2005. Local man credited with saving family from highway accident. The article was 4 paragraphs. The man was not named at his own request. He was described as a former soldier in his mid-20s. There was a quote from the county sheriff. He pulled 3 people out of that vehicle in sub-zero temperatures before emergency services arrived. The youngest victim would not have survived another 10 minutes. Whoever he is, he saved at least 1 life that night, possibly 3. Emily sat back. She read the date again. The 29th of January, 2005. She had been 16. Her parents had been 44 and 41. The accident had been on State Route 12, outside of Alanale. She looked at the second document, a search and rescue report from 2011, an incident in which a member of the Franklin County team had sustained a serious laceration to his left hand and wrist during a winter extraction, deep tissue damage, severed tendons, 3 surgeries, partial permanent loss of grip strength. The officer who had sustained the injury was not named in the public portion of the report, but the incident date, the location, and the nature of the injury were consistent with what Margot had found in the medical records obtained through means Emily did not ask about. The loss of grip strength in the left hand. The career that had required full physical capability ended at 30. She closed the file. For a long time she sat and looked at the snow outside her office window, which faced west and got no direct light in the morning. He had pulled her out of a car. He had gone back in for her mother. He had gone back in a second time for her unconscious father. He had done all of this in a temperature of 4 degrees Fahrenheit in the dark on an icy mountain road. And then he had disappeared into the snow, and in the process he had torn his hand badly enough that it had ended the career he had built after the Army. And he had never once, not in 20 years, attempted to make that anyone else's problem. Emily Carter picked up her phone and called Margot. "I need a table at Aurelius for Friday," she said. "Table 9. She went alone again. The snow had eased off by Friday, leaving the city gray and sharp-edged. She arrived at 7, ordered water, and waited. Marcus appeared at her table at 7. Something shifted in his face when he saw her. Barely anything. A slight tightening around the eyes, but she caught it. "Good evening," he said, same quiet voice. "Can I start you with something while you look at the menu?" "I'd like to talk to you," Emily said. "I'm working." "I know. I'd still like to talk to you when you have a moment." He looked at her for a count of 3. "Ma'am, if there's been an issue with service..." "There hasn't." She met his eyes steadily. January 20, 9th, 2005, State Route 12, outside Alanale. It was 2 degrees below zero, and there was a car on its side in the ditch below the guardrail. There was a 16-year-old girl in the back seat. The stillness that came over him was not the stillness of a man who had been caught. It was the stillness of a man who had been expecting something for a long time and was now watching it arrive. "You have the wrong person," he said. "I don't think I do." "Then I'm sorry to disappoint you." He set the menu down. "I'll give you another few minutes." He walked away. She let him go. She ordered dinner, the lamb this time, and ate it slowly and said nothing else to him for the remainder of the service. He was professional, attentive. He kept his left hand angled down and slightly away. When the bill came, she paid it. Then she wrote 4 words on the back of a card and left it under the bread basket. I owe you everything. She did not look at him on her way out. The following Tuesday, she came back. This time she waited until the end of service, 10:30, when most of the other tables had cleared. She had nursed a glass of wine for 3 hours, and she was not remotely drunk, and the hostess had given up trying to rush her out. Marcus came to her table and stood and looked at her with an expression that was, for the first time, something other than neutral. I know what you're doing, he said. I'm having dinner, Miss Carter. He stopped. Then, Emily, I know who you are. I'm asking you. He paused again, chose the words carefully. Please don't do this. Do what? Make it into something. It was a long time ago. You were injured, she said. Seriously injured. You lost your career. People lose careers. He said it without self-pity. That was what struck her. There was no performance in it, no invitation for sympathy. It was just a fact he had organized his life around. You lost it because of me. I lost it doing what I was already doing every week. He pulled out the chair across from her and then stopped himself and stood holding the back of it. The hand was a problem before that night. That night was just... He let go of the chair. It would have happened anyway. She looked at him. Is that true? A pausa. No, but it doesn't change anything. It changes. I have a daughter, he said. She's 8. I have a job I can do. An apartment. Enough. I don't need anything from you. The voice was still quiet, but there was something under it now. Not anger. Something more complicated than anger. Something that had been folded up and put away a long time ago and did not enjoy being unfolded. I understand why you're here, I do, but whatever you're thinking, the answer is no. Emily sat with that for a moment. Okay, she said. He looked at her with the slightest hint of surprise, as if he had expected more argument. Okay, she said again. Good night, Marcus. She put on her coat and left. She didn't go back to the restaurant. She told herself it was respect. She told herself she was honoring what he had asked for. That lasted 11 days. On the 12th day, Margot forwarded her a new piece of information unprompted, because Margot had a gift for knowing when Emily needed to know something she hadn't asked for. It was a public record. An eviction filing from 2022 withdrawn before completion but filed 2 months after Marcus Ellison had started at Aurelius. And before that, a gap in employment of nearly 2 years, 2020 to 2022, coinciding with the onset of the pandemic and the closure of the warehouse operation he'd been supervising. She did the math. He had been working 2 jobs before the restaurant. She had seen reference to that in Margot's initial report, a warehouse supervisor during the day and part-time security work at night. The warehouse had closed permanently in the spring of 2020. The security company had downsized by mid-2021. With a 5-year-old daughter in a city in lockdown, he had burned through whatever savings he had, filed for a payment plan with the city for back rent, and started over. She thought about what it took to do that quietly, without asking anyone for anything. She thought about him at 24 on that highway in the dark, going back into a car that smelled of gasoline not once but twice for people he did not know. She thought about what she had been doing at 30 when he was in surgery for the 3rd time on his left hand. She had been closing her Series B. She had been having champagne in a conference room with people she barely liked. She had not thought about him that day. She thought about him periodically, distantly, the way you thought about something that had happened to you before you became who you were, an event from another life. He had been carrying the consequences of it every day since. She called Margot. Nia Ellison, she said. She's at Kenmore Elementary. What's the waitlist situation at Whitfield Academy for next fall? Margot was quiet for a moment. For scholarship enrollment, the application deadline was 3 weeks ago. I know when the deadline was, Emily said. What's the waitlist situation? And find out who Marcus Ellison's landlord is. Emily, he said no to you directly. He didn't say anything about his daughter's school. Margot sighed. It was a very specific sigh, the one she reserved for situations where she disapproved, but was going to do the thing anyway. I'll have it by tomorrow. Emily stood at her window and looked at the city. She wasn't doing this to feel better about herself. That was important to be clear about, at least internally. She wasn't doing this to balance a ledger. She was doing this because she had looked at his daughter's drawing taped to the door. She had seen it when she'd asked a favor of a colleague who lived in that building, quite casually, for a completely unrelated reason, and she had thought this child deserves more than subsistence. and the black man providing it deserves to not be doing it alone. That was all. She was very good at telling herself things. It started, as these things do, with small things that could be explained away. The landlord contacted Marcus in late February to inform him that the building had been purchased by a new investment group and that, as part of the acquisition, all existing lease agreements would be honored at current rates locked in for 3 years. Marcus thanked him and hung up and stood in the kitchen for a while. In March, he received a letter from Whitfield Academy informing him that Nia Ellison had been selected for their merit-based scholarship program beginning in September, covering full tuition and materials. The letter cited an anonymous nomination from a community member. He read the letter twice. Then he folded it and put it in the kitchen drawer where he kept important documents and went and sat on the couch and did not move for 15 minutes. Nia found him there when she got home from school. "Baba, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he said. "Come here." She climbed up next to him and leaned against his side and showed him a drawing she'd made. "A wolf," she said, though it looked more like a rectangle with legs. He said it was a very good wolf. "Is something good happening?" she asked. "Maybe." "Is it because of the pretty lady?" He looked down at her. "What pretty lady?" Nia shrugged with the elaborate casualness of an 8-year-old who knew she had said something interesting. "Mrs. Harmon said someone asked about my class. A lady with dark hair. She said she was thinking about enrolling her niece." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Did she?" he said. He called in sick the next day, first time in 14 months, and drove to the address listed for Carter Capital Group on the publicly available business registration. He sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes and then got out and went inside and asked to see Emily Carter. The receptionist gave him a look that suggested this was not typically how things worked. "Tell her Marcus Ellison is here," he said. 5 minutes later, he was in an elevator. Her office was on the 14th floor, and it was not what he'd expected. He had expected glass and steel and the aggressive minimalism of serious money. Instead, there were books everywhere. Real books, stacked and annotated, and a large desk that faced away from the view, and 2 chairs by the window that looked actually sat in. Emily was standing when he walked in. She was in a gray suit, and her hair was pulled back, and her expression was entirely composed, which told him she had expected this. "You asked about my daughter's class," he said. "I asked about a school. I didn't mention your daughter." "Don't do that." His voice was still quiet, but there was something in it now that had not been there in the restaurant. Something harder, more direct. "I told you no. I was clear. You were, and I respected that. You enrolled my daughter in a private school. She was nominated for a scholarship," Emily said carefully, "based on her academic record, which is apparently quite strong." "Emily," he said her name for the first time, "stop." She stopped. "I understand what you're trying to do," he said, "and I'm telling you for the second time that I don't want it. Not the school, not the apartment, not whatever comes next." He looked at her evenly. "I know you think you owe me something, but you don't get to decide what that looks like for me and my daughter. She deserves a good education. I'll provide that on a server's salary." "Yes," he said, "on a server's salary. It'll take longer. It'll be harder. That's my problem to solve." He was not angry. That was the thing that made it so difficult. He was just certain. "I'm not asking you to understand it. I'm asking you to stop." Emily held his gaze for a long moment. "Nia's scholarship has already been processed," she said. "Whitfield doesn't undo those. The landlord situation is done. The new owner bought the whole building. It has nothing specifically to do with you." She paused. "But I hear you, and I'll stop." He looked at her. "The restaurant job," he said. "I'll take another section if you're going to keep coming in. I won't come in anymore. Thank you." He turned to go. "Marcus." She said it quietly. He stopped, but didn't turn around. "I'm not trying to make you into something you didn't ask to be. I just..." She paused. "I know what that night cost you. I'm sorry it cost you anything." A long silence. He walked out without answering. That night, after Nia was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't drink and the folded Whitfield letter in front of him. He sat there for a long time. It happened on a Thursday in early April, when the snow had finally given way to a cold, wet rain that made the streets shine under the street lamps. Marcus's phone rang at 2:17. He was awake before he was fully awake. It was the overnight nurse at Children's Memorial. Nia had been rushed in by ambulance. His neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, had found her burning with fever and unresponsive at midnight when she'd gone to check on her after Marcus's second shift ran long. He was at the hospital in 12 minutes. Nia was in a room on the 3rd floor, hooked to an IV, warm brown skin, gone dull with illness against the pillow, a monitor beeping steadily. The attending physician, A woman named Dr. Riordan told him it was bacterial pneumonia. Aggressive, fast-moving but caught in time. In time meant within a window of hours. If Mrs. Kowalski had not gone to check, he sat down in the chair next to Nia's bed and held her hand. Her fingers were thin and warm from the fever, and she didn't wake up. The doctor had listed the treatment plan. It was a good plan. The antibiotics were IV and strong. Insurance would cover most of it. He had insurance through the restaurant, a fact he had arranged specifically so that it covered Nia, but there were several line items in the preliminary paperwork that were not covered. A specialist consultation, a particular diagnostic test, doctor. Riordan wanted to run that was newer and not yet on the standard reimbursement list. He looked at the numbers. He had $840 in his checking account and 4 days until his next paycheck. At 4 a.m., he stepped into the hallway to call his mother in Ohio, but she was 71 and not well, and he put the phone down before it rang. He called Greg, the restaurant manager. Greg was a decent man. He could probably get an advance. He called. It went to voicemail. He left a message. He went back and sat with Nia. At 5:30 a.m., there was a soft knock on the door of the room. He turned around. Emily Carter was standing in the doorway, in a dark coat, her hair loose. She had clearly not planned to be awake either. She looked at him, and then at Nia, and then back at him. And her expression was not pitying, not performative, just present. "I have a medical contact at this hospital," she said quietly. "Dr. Fielding is the head of pediatric infectious disease. He's one of the best in the country. I can have him here in 30 minutes. Marcus looked at her. "How did you know?" he said. "Mrs. Kowalski is my building manager's aunt." A pause. "It's a small city." He looked at Nia. The monitor beeped. The rain made soft sounds against the window, which faced east, and the sky outside was starting to shift from black to a dark, uncertain gray. He thought about the things he had said to her in the office, the careful speech about autonomy and providing for his own daughter. All of it true, all of it still true. And Nia was 8 years old and burning with fever. And he had $840 in a checking account. "Call him," he said. Dr. Fielding arrived at 6:10 a.m. He reviewed Nia's case with the thoroughness of a man who had seen thousands of them and still approached each one as if it were the first. He adjusted the antibiotic protocol slightly and ordered the additional diagnostic. He spoke to Marcus for 15 minutes, nodding to him in plain language, looking him in the eye. When he left, the room was quieter. Emily was still there, sitting in the second chair at enough distance to be unobtrusive. She had brought 2 coffees from somewhere, the hospital cafeteria probably, and had set one near Marcus without comment. He picked it up. Outside the window, the sky had gone from dark gray to lighter gray. The rain had eased off. "She has your stubbornness," Emily said. He looked at Nia, who had slightly improved color and whose small hand was still in his. "That's not stubbornness," he said. "That's constitution." A brief, surprised sound from Emily. Not quite a laugh, but close. "How long has it been since someone sat with you through something?" she asked. She wasn't being therapeutic. It was a genuine question. He thought about it honestly. "A while." She nodded once. No comment, just acknowledgement. They sat with the soft beeping of the monitor and the gray light coming through the window, and neither of them said anything for 20 minutes. And that was the most honest conversation they had had. Nia was discharged on the 4th day. She came home in Emily's car, a practical sedan, not the ostentatious choice Emily could have made, because Marcus's car had a busted heater and it was still 42 degrees outside, and this was so obviously logical that he couldn't argue against it without sounding irrational. Nia was pale and quiet from the antibiotics, but her eyes were bright. She sat in the back seat and looked out the window, and then looked at Emily in the rearview mirror and said, "Are you Daddy's friend?" Marcus said, "She's someone I know from work." Emily said, simultaneously, "Yes." Nia considered this. "He doesn't have many friends," she informed Emily. "Nia," Marcus said. "He says he does, but he doesn't. Mrs. Kowalski doesn't count because she's basically family and you work all the time." She addressed this last part to Emily as if Emily were responsible for fixing it. "He needs more friends." "I'll see what I can do," Emily said. They got Nia settled on the couch with a blanket and a cup of soup and an animated film about a dog who could talk. And then Marcus and Emily stood in the kitchen on opposite sides of the counter, speaking quietly so as not to be heard. "Thank you," he said. It came out plainly. None of the complicated resistance that had characterized their previous conversations. You don't have to. I know I don't. He looked at her. I'm saying it because it's true, not because of anything else. She nodded. A pause. He poured water into the coffee maker and said, without looking at her, the night of the accident. She went still. I was on my way back from visiting my mother in Allenale, he said. I heard the crash. There was nobody else on that road. He looked at the water filling the reservoir. I was 23. I'd been out of the army 6 months. He paused. It was a bad winter, for other reasons. I wasn't doing well. He stopped then. And then there was this sound and I pulled over and I went down to the car and there was a girl in the back seat and He stopped again. She was very calm, he said, given everything. I thought about that a lot afterward, how calm she was. Emily didn't say anything. I wasn't calm, she said. I was terrified. I just didn't have a way to show it. He looked at her then, and something passed between them that was less about what had happened on that road 20 years ago and more about what they were both doing right now in this small apartment, in this quiet conversation. When you showed up at the restaurant, he said, the first time I knew. Not immediately, but by the end of the service I knew. Why did you pretend you didn't? Because I'd spent 20 years making it not matter. He said it without drama. If it didn't matter, then everything that came after didn't have to mean anything either. The hand, Tiana leaving, all of it. He poured 2 coffees. But it mattered. Of course it mattered. I wasn't ready to let someone come in and rearrange the story I'd made up about it. Emily took the coffee. He slid toward her. Is that what I did? You showed up with 20 years of it on your face, he said. And I'd spent 20 years putting mine somewhere I couldn't see it. A beat. That's what made it hard. Not the offer of help. The film played in the living room. Nia's voice drifted through the doorway. She was talking to the dog on screen, offering it her opinion about something. She's going to be fine, Emily said. Dr. Fielding confirmed it. I know. And Whitfield is a good school. He looked at her, a long measuring look, and then, for the first time in all the weeks she had known him, he smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, contained in the corner of his mouth. But it was real. Don't push it, he said. I'm not pushing anything. She wrapped both hands around her coffee. I'm just present, if that's acceptable. He considered this. I suppose that's acceptable. In the living room, Nia said loudly, Daddy, come watch this part. The dog is doing something. He looked toward the doorway. Then at Emily. Come watch this part, he said. The dog is doing something. She followed him into the living room. 5 months later, September came in warm and gold-edged. The kind of September that made you forget the city had ever been cold. The leaves on the trees along Kenmore Avenue were beginning to turn first at the edges, a slow burn of amber and rust. Nia started at Whitfield Academy on a Wednesday. She wore a new backpack, dark green, her choice, and her hair was in 2 uneven braids that she had insisted on doing herself. Marcus walked her to the door of the building and crouched down and straightened her collar. And she submitted to this for approximately 3 seconds before she said, I know, Dad, and walked inside with the particular confidence of a small person who had decided not to be nervous. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment after the door closed. His phone buzzed. Emily, how'd she do? He typed back, 3 seconds. Then she walked in like she owned the place. A pause. Then, of course she did. He put the phone in his pocket and walked to the subway. Things had changed over the summer. Not dramatically, not in the ways Emily had originally tried to arrange, but in the quieter ways that came from 2 people deciding to stop being strangers. He had a new job. Not because Emily had engineered it, but because an operations manager at a logistics firm had been a regular at Aurelius and had, over the course of several months, observed Marcus handle every difficult table, every impossible situation, every short-staffed Friday night with a competence that was honestly wasted on dinner service. He had offered Marcus a position managing the firm's ground operations for the Northeast Corridor. Marcus had taken 2 weeks to consider it. He had asked Greg about leaving with proper notice. He had started in August. The salary was 3 times what he'd made at the restaurant. He had not told Emily about it until it was already done. When he did, she had been quiet for a moment, and then she had said, You didn't need me for that. No, he said, I didn't. She had laughed. Actually laughed. The real version, not the polite one. And he had thought, there it is. Because he had been waiting months to hear what that sounded like. They had dinner sometimes. Not always. They were both busy. They both had things that required attention. But sometimes Nia had started calling her Emily, then M, then occasionally M, which was some kind of 8-year old linguistic evolution that Marcus did not fully understand, but had stopped trying to. On a Saturday in late September, they were at a park near the river, Nia running somewhere ahead of them, visible by the green backpack she had insisted on wearing, even on school days because she liked it. And Emily said, looking at the water, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd taken a different road that night?" He walked next to her. Their shoulders were close but not touching. He had been aware of the distance between them for months. Not uncomfortably, not as something urgent, just as a thing that existed, and was slowly changing without anyone making a speech about it. "I think about it sometimes," he said. "Less than I used to." "Less than you used to?" "Because the things that came from that road." He looked ahead at Nia, who had found a large stick and was dragging it along the path. "Most of them are here." Emily was quiet for a moment. "That's a generous way to look at it," she said, given what the road also took. "People don't get to know which version of their life is the real one," he said, "so I try not to do that math." She nodded slowly. Nia had stopped ahead of them and turned around with the stick held horizontally, examining it with the focus of a scientist who had discovered something of immense significance. "Baba," she called, "this is the biggest stick I have ever seen in my life." "It's very impressive," he said. "Can we keep it?" "Because where would we put it?" "In the living room," she said, as if this were obvious. Emily said quietly, so only he heard, "She's not wrong that it would fit." He glanced at her. She was looking at Nia, but the corner of her mouth was doing the thing it did when she was trying not to smile. "Don't encourage the stick," he said. "I'm not encouraging anything," she said. "I'm just present." He heard the echo of her words from months ago, present, if that's acceptable, and let them sit. Nia had lost interest in the stick debate and was now crouching by the water's edge, studying something. The light through the trees was warm and long, the particular light of late afternoon and early fall, the kind that made everything look like it was being seen for the first time. He reached over and his hand found hers. It was not a dramatic thing, not announced. Just a hand finding a hand the way hands do when they've been moving toward each other for a long time without rushing. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. Nia stood up from the water's edge and turned around and looked at them with the specific expression of an 8-year-old who had noticed something and had decided it was satisfactory. "Okay," she said, apparently to no one in particular. She went back to looking at the water. The light held. The river moved. Somewhere behind them the city kept doing what cities do. All that noise and motion and forward pressure, but here by the water it was quiet. His thumb moved slightly against the back of her hand. That was all. That was everything.
How many single dads have to prove they are capable before money stops confusing help with control? Some people leverage a scholarship letter, others leverage a lease renewal. Some call it generosity, others call it deciding for you. What would you have done in Marcus' place? Keep saying no or let someone show up when your child needed it most? If stories like this hit home, subscribe and stay with us because when a child is on the line, the right paper trail isn't about power, it's about protection.